Now, what this looks like in our system is a full breakdown into things like members, stocks, equity, reporting, and tax. We do provide ways in order to do all of these things, which is broken down even more into member management, where we can talk more about just storing member information. It could be a source of truth. It could be a secondary source to keep track of things like addresses, PII where necessary. You can also add in contacts. A member can have multiple contacts. You can also implement lien holders, which depending on the lien style, that may or may not prevent you from creating payments or transferring stocks, things like that. And then we have this idea of stock management, right? Stocks really get broken down into issuance, then tracking, and even the transfer among members. We also have this idea of equity. Equity really starts from a transaction, and that transaction could be bushels of corn. That transaction could be an actual dollar amount that was spent with the company. But once we start with transactions, we go through this process that Levridge has built called an allocation and then a revolvement. An allocation is typically performed every year. And what happens from that is you will create credits. This credit will essentially just sit on a member's account until it's approved to be paid out. Now, you may pay out every year, but I would say that the majority of the time, what you'll see is revolvements are really approved 10 years later. So this idea of a revolvement is really likely the board saying, I approve to pay out $2 million this year. What that means is we would go back, look at the oldest credit out there, and try and pay out as much of the $2 million as we could. And that revolvement process is how we create payments. Beyond that, though, there is this idea of reporting and tax. We do offer customer-facing reports that you can print and generate, and that includes things like an equity summary or a revolvement summary. And then we also have this idea of a stock certificate report, which does allow you to, again, report out to your members what stocks they own. We also do help with 1099 tax data exports. So we'll basically create a file based on the year, and then you can upload that into whichever tax preparer service that you use. So that's a high-level intro to the system, but I do want to actually jump in and see what we're working with. So let me share my screen. Right. One thing I do want to point out is that we do currently offer 2 methods of logging in. We are in the process of phasing this out, but right now we do have the ability to sign in with your Microsoft account. This allows users to be more active in their user management. You can really lock down system access by just turning off their account, things like that. And so this is really what we're going for. Once I do sign in with Microsoft, which I've logged in here once today, so it should log me in pretty quick, you'll see that it gets us into the home screen. This home screen is really meant to be a dashboard, a very quick view, maybe even an in-your-face view of what's going on. Right now, this is the organizational summary. So here we can see the equity summary. This is all of the credits that are remaining out there right now that have yet to be paid. You can see I do have data all the way back until 2016, but we can break it down so we can just see how much patronage is owed. We can just see how much retains is owed, and you can see that information here in the grid as well. But this gives you a good picture and the ability to let the board know things like, hey, we actually owe this much for this period, or we actually owe, $78,000 for patronage back in 2016. So we really want to get through paying that out, things like that. We also have this idea of a stock summary. Here, you would just see the total number of stocks that you have, as well as the value of those stocks. Those are something you set up in the system when first going through the implementation, right? Both of these do export the grids, so you're able to export that information from here. Otherwise, this is our home screen. In order to get all of this to work, excuse me, is some setup that's necessary. So there is what I called the implementation process, and that starts by setting up things like the organization settings. Now, this is pretty customizable, right? We can put in whatever company name you want here. We can also adjust things like the color and the logo. And then there's also even some more definable options within the system. Once you've got this established, we'll also create the idea of a source where you can establish if it's a co-op, if it's taxable, if you'll consider lien holders in the system. And we'll also break it down into setting up things like shared classes and categories. Beyond that, we will also have to set up periods. Now, periods could be a calendar year, or this could be the idea of a crop year. Just depends on how your business works. But this allows you to navigate throughout the system and have transactions based on that time frame, and then also allocations and revolvements based on that time frame as well. Okay. So let's talk about this idea before we even dive into any of these of just uploading members into the system. Now you'll see here in the navigation that we do have this idea of imports. Here's where you can import almost anything into the system, and this does accept CSVs. I have already imported the accounts in order to provide some of this demo data, but it's a pretty simple select what kind of import you'll do, and then choose the file you plan to import. Once you do that, you can monitor the progress within this process dashboard. We do use this in order to help users see just how far things have gone, how much time it takes. But really, it should take no time at all. And then you'll have your list of members. So once we upload a member, they're visible from the Members tab, and we can come in and view them at any point. Now, a member has a decent amount of data depending on what you've got in the system. The stuff that we will have imported will be this sort of information where we have an email address, we have a phone number, an account number. Likely this will match your ERP or your system of truth. And then we've also got these ideas of EINs. There's so much information that you can add if it's something that you desire. But then, of course, we've got this idea of the equity summary. This matches the organizational summary, but it's broken down at the member level. So this is just showing you what that member is owed in total, and then also what they own for shares. You can add or edit a member from these screens. I mentioned the idea of contacts and lien holders. You can also add those to the system here. And then, of course, this page is also downloadable to a CSV. So you can still get all of this information back, and you can upload from the imports as well. This is also searchable. You can even use the filters in the grid here. And it's sortable. So who do we owe the most to? Let's see. Ezra James. Perfect. All right, so once you have your members uploaded, you can really start the rest of the process. At that point, you can upload shares if that's something that you're using, as long as you have this idea of share classes established. This is one of those setup pieces I mentioned. Right now, I've got 2 shares in here. The idea of a voting stock and a common. These may be the same thing for you. You can name these whatever you would like. It's a simple add process. But then you can upload shares that refer to these for each member. So Again, I have already done that in the system, but it's a very simple import, or you can add a share individually depending on the need. So if we head to all member stock here, you can see that I can simply just add one, and then we could walk through that process here really quick. So if we do a common one, we mark today as our issue date, and then I would like to set my own certificate number. And we did that for Abigail. Perfect. So let's look for Abigail. There she is, and there is my new stock that I just created. So this will get added to the homepage for the organizational stock summary, but it also gets added to Abigail's account specifically. So here we can see all members stock. This again is downloadable. You also have the ability to cancel a stock if that was needed. In this case, I would just enter a reason. And then this becomes an auditable action in the system that is tracked, and we can confirm that cancellation. But then we can view it from this shares transfers page because this was transferred out of their account. So you can see that we had 17 and now there are none, and that will be removed from their account. Perfect. So there is the idea of transferring a share between members. If we walk through this, and again, let's just find any of these. If we navigate to this equity and stocks page, here we would have the ability to transfer equity, which we'll talk about a little later, but then here we have the opportunity to transfer shares themselves. So if I were to select a share, looks like there are 22 of these. I want to transfer 5. I want to transfer them today, and I do want to transfer them to Ashley, sure. Okay. Then there will be some remaining, so you can name that however you'd like as well. Perfect. So if we come out here to stock certificates, we can see that this member used to have so many, but we transferred, and now they only have 17. They did have 22 before. Perfect. That will also appear in the shares transfer page. You can see there was 22. We're down to 17, and now Ashley has 5. Perfect. All right, so here's where we get into the real meat and potatoes of the process. And this deals with first transactions. All transactions are uploaded at a category level, and that category is set up just like share classes. It's just something where you add in a category. We could add in one right now. Let's just say this is feed. And we could do this in dollars if we don't select this, or we could do this in anything we'd like let's say this is a ton. Once the category is created, then we can upload transactions against it. So transactions can be imported in a very similar way. You can go through this imports process, or you can just select imports on the transactions page. But that allows you to, again, upload a CSV in order to utilize these transactions in following processes. Right? So if you would set up some of the user-defined fields in the organization settings, you would also see them here if they were filled out. So this is just a little bit extra information if you wanted to upload things like notes, branch number, things like that alongside of the transaction. But here you can see that I've kind of got this idea of 3 transactions per account, and that's also per year. So I have transactions going all the way back to 2016. And then I've got this idea that we will allocate out each year. Now, if we take a step back to our organizational summary, you can see, like I said, that I did allocate out each year and there are credits remaining. So what that looks like is a kind of choose your own adventure. Every co-op does allocations differently, every single one of them. I don't think you'll ever find one that does it the same way. But because of that, we try to make this as flexible as possible. So in this case, you can see that I've done fuel and grain, but I did have another category out there called fertilizer. So let's look at this idea of creating an allocation for 2016 for fertilizer. I would say that if this was the 2016 fertilizer allocation, you would likely be doing this in 2017 because then all of the 2016 transactions have been performed, but you would typically do it just right after that. You would allocate almost always right away. But again, this is really a choose your own adventure. So you can name this however you'd like. I'm going to call this fertilizer, and I'm going to say that this does produce patronage. You get to choose, again, the type of allocation that this is. If this is a per unit retains that needs to be retains reported on taxes, then you may choose that option, right? There are other options like Section 199A. There are work opportunity credits and just patronage. I'm going to just select patronage today, but this will help to define and then do that tax reporting that I've mentioned in the system, what these credits really will be. The rest of this is basically just a query. It's trying to say, which transactions do you want me to perform this calculation against? So in this case, I'm going to say that this was a common share class. That's how I uploaded all of my transactions. This was for period 2016. So it's only going to look at 2016 transactions. Again, when I uploaded, I said these were sale and they were qualified. Now, if there was for any reason some sort of estate payout, or you just needed to fully allocate out one member, or maybe that one member follows some different rules, you can do that. You can select a member at this time. Right now I'm going to leave that blank, which means it's going to run for all members. But then we have this idea of calculation type. We do currently have two allocation types in the system that are shown here. That is the idea of a rate and then a weighted average. I would say that the majority of the time you will see a rate used in this instance, but this rate is really so that you can define, let's say you want to give back 2 cents a bushel, or for every dollar they spend, they get a penny back. That kind of ownership scheme is what's going to create that credit that you owe them, but that's typically defined when you start working with the co-op. So at this point, we'll choose a rate. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that 1 cent. I do need to pick my category. You can pick multiple categories though, and depending on how you set this calculation type will determine how that runs. Okay. So in this case, if we go ahead and select fertilizer, that was our category of choice, then we can go ahead and save. At this point, what we've done is we've made our own calculator. We've done this so that it will go out there and find the appropriate transactions, and it's going to perform the calculation that we want against them. So one really nice thing about this calculator, though, is that it gives you the option of running what's considered a model allocation or a final allocation. If you run a model allocation right now, what it's going to do is produce the CSV for you of what the results would look like. And that's awesome because sometimes you just need to be able to see some preliminary results and not necessarily have the finals right away. Sometimes not all the transactions are uploaded. Sometimes you just want to make sure that the total you're getting fits within budget for the year. Maybe they needed to adjust it to be an even lower percent or a lower rate. But we can produce that model allocation, or we can jump into final. In this instance, I am going to go straight for final, which means that a credit will actually be produced. But I'll go ahead and generate that. Confirm. It is final. And it's final in the sense that credits are being created. You can undo this process as long as you have not already revolved out. That's like right now, any of the transactions that were used in here will become locked down because they've been used. They can't be used again. And we want to make sure that They are in the system for posterity's sake, for auditability, and then also just to make sure that they are interconnected, right? So now we've run this, we'll see that there are credits created under equity here, but before I even do that, I just want to show you that you can still download these results. You can view what the allocation looked like. And then if we jump over to our home screen, we can also see now that we have more patronage that was added to the screen. If we had done this under a different category, we would see a different result here. Previously, though, we had 78,000. So we can go and check out the credits that were made from that. So in 2016, if we just look for ones that contained fertilizer, you can see that these were all of those credits. And right now you can also see that this is how much you've allocated. We haven't paid anything of that out yet. We haven't done any sort of revolvement. And so we still owe all of it. This is where we get to our next step of revolvements though. But before we do that, there's just a couple of screens I want to walk through. There is the idea of all member equity, and this gives you a very full view of all of the equity for all of the members. It will show it to you for across all periods. In all of the other screens, things like credits load per year, but this page is across all years and it's totaled up. So in this case, this is all of the 2016 retains and patronage and the total. Okay. There's also this idea of equity transfers. It works very similarly to the share transfers. So again, if we just pop back into here and we go to equity and stocks, we can click transfer, and this will allow us to move things from one member to another. Now you could transfer everything that this member has. You could transfer based on the allocation. So in this case, there's quite a few allocations that they've performed, and you could just transfer all of these results, right? Otherwise, we can also do just a percentage of an allocation. Maybe you wanted to do 10% of the 2016 grain patronage, right? You can define that however you'd like. Or there's this idea of specific amount. You do still choose an allocation in that sense, but this means that we could transfer $200. Let's, of course, again, transfer it over to Ashley. But this will move the equity from this member to the other member. We went down by 200, and we can see in equity transfers that that has been moved over. Perfect. So now that everyone has the equity that they need, it's really time for a revolvement. This is the payout process or the start of it, and this really determines exactly what kind of check a member will get for the co-op. In this case, I haven't built any, right? I'm going to say that everything that was in the system was what was in there, and we are now going to go revolve out come 2016. Now, again, create your own adventure. This is just us providing a calculator and the tools in order for you to grab the results you want, calculate it, and then find a payment out of that, right? So we try to be as flexible as possible. And what I'm going to say here is this is the 2026, patronage payout. Okay. Types. Now these revolvement types are standard and dollar amount. And again, those are just calculations. Those are ways for you to perform these revolvement calculations. And it's going to be, of course, based on what your business desires, right? So in this case, a standard revolvement is pretty simple. You're going to select which credits you want to revolve out, basically. A dollar amount revolvement, however, is more of along the lines of we have $1 million to pay out. We want to start at a certain time frame, and we want to pay out as much as we can. Okay, so I do want to walk you through what kind of the options are here for both. But again, this is just a calculator. It's just a tool to find the appropriate transactions. I said transactions, excuse me, credits, the appropriate credits, and then create payments based on those. So in this case, when we do this idea of a standard revolvement, what we do is we select the revolvement period, that's right now. And you can revolve out a percentage. So we could just do 50% of the very first patronage allocations. So we could choose a category or we could choose all. If you recall, both grain and fertilizer had a 2016. So we could do 50% of both of those, which means I'm just going to choose all. And then let's pick that 2016 allocation period. Now, you don't have to select an allocation, but you can. And then I do want to choose patronage and the related distribution type. Now, if I were to utilize this idea of summarized payments, what's going to happen is instead of creating one payment, excuse me, if instead of creating two payments, it will create one, right? In 2016, most members had a fertilizer and a grain credit, right? And so in this case, I only want to make one payment for each person. I would summarize payments. For now, I'm going to keep them separate. I just want to let you know that that option is there. So we'll go ahead and save. Again, this is just us creating a calculator, so let's go ahead and generate it now. The payments are actually being generated, and what that means is it's creating records out here in the payments that you can go and check on. It's also going to update the related credit records. So let's go take a look at the payments. So here you can see that we did create those payments. We'll also see back on the home screen that the amount owed was reduced. Perfect. And then if we also go to look at our credits in 2016, let's go ahead and again just look for that fertilizer. You'll see that 50% was paid. Okay. So here you can see we've got a bit of an audit trail where 50% was revolved out. Okay. Now there's one final step in the system in order to really mark this process as finished and done. But before we even do that, I do want to just look at one more revolvement. If in 2026, we talk about this idea of dollar amount, what we're really saying is we want to set a dollar amount. This allocation becomes a starting period. So let's go ahead and do 2016 again. Let's do dollar amount. I want to do as much as we can. We don't have to set an estimated payment date. That is an optional field. And I want to pay out 300,000. Again, this is common. Let's go ahead and choose our fuel. And this was qualified. Let's go ahead and summarize those. That'll be good. So now when we run this, we should see our total update to our requested total. 300,000. If we come back again to the home screen, we should see a big difference now. We paid out as much as we could. Again, 300,000 of that retains. Okay. And then in payments, we'll be able to see in some instances that these are made up of more than one thing. So here you can see that they paid out the per unit retains from 2016, 2017, and so on. Okay. Now, what you need to do is download the payments file. This process is really just going to be to mark them all as paid, and that really locks them down in the system. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. Share that here with you. This is mostly used just to help you download and then import it into your ERP, at which point you'd make a vendor payment journal where necessary. But the thing that you need to do is update the payment date. So let's go ahead and say today. And then provide a reference number. So in this case, this would likely be a check number. You may say wire. It could just be a payment reference, whatever you'd like to say. It is optional. But I'm just going to say check number 1. Okay, let's go ahead and copy that down as well. And then we're going to go ahead and save. Okay, now that we've got it saved, what we'll do is come back over here to, we can do it here on payments if we'd like, or from that import. So if I go ahead and just choose the payments file, what this is going to do is update the payment date. It will lock down the record, and it will also mark everything as paid according to taxes, actual payouts from reports, and then it will update the related credit records. You won't be able to pay any more out, of course, right? So here we can see the paid records do have that payment date on it, as well as a check number where applicable. Again, if we look back at our credit records for 2016, we should be able to see, actually let's try 2017 even, should be able to see that those were all paid out from that 2026 retains process. You can even see which check number, and that it's fully paid. Now that things are fully paid and locked down, we really get to this idea of reporting and tax. Now again, reporting is very optional. It's customer facing, but these are our out of the box reports. If for any reason you did need a report that utilized this information, we could help to provide that. But these are the out of the box ones. And I'll just show you what the equity summary looks like, for instance. So in this case, let's just choose a member. There's this idea of starting period and ending period, and then you get to choose really what you want to see on the report. In this case, I'm only generating one report, so I don't need to select any of these options. And I did pick just to show patronage and qualified. But this is what we're seeing right here. We can see everything that Ashley is owed for all allocation periods, right? So we know that we owe her almost $20,000. We did pay her out quite a lot this year with those retains and even the patronage payouts, but this is what remains. Okay. The other reports are also very similar. It will just continue to show you things like payment summaries for the members, revolvements, stock certificates. This one is an internal facing, and I don't have any lien holders set up in this demo environment right now, and so it's a little bit boring. You won't see much, but this is an internal facing, and it's really for you to understand that this many members have lien holders for stocks. This many has it for patronage, right? You can prevent payouts based on that, and this will give you a good view into those lien holders. But finally, in this system, we do have this idea of 1099 prep, okay? In this case, I did make a 2026 reporting year already, but I'm gonna go ahead and rebuild it based on the information that we've just created. So that process goes through, deletes the current 1099 information and reloads it. It just goes into the system to find the truth and what's actually been paid, and then we'll populate based on that. So right, we've got our standard 1099 boxes here. Okay. I can't recall which one is retains or patronage, but these are filling in the correct ones. And then we do give you the option to come in here and to make some updates where applicable, right? So if for some reason someone's address changed, you can come in here and adjust it for just the year, but not adjust it on the member itself if you'd like. Also, if for some reason you had a box 8 piece of information, you're welcome to type that in if that helps with your CSV prep. And then once you're ready, you will just download this and use your tax preparing software to use that CSV where you'd like. Of course, we've got a little bit of about information, so that's out here. You can check on that anytime. So that was the equity and patronage system. We created it in a way to be easy to set up, easy to use, and then just again, that idea of create your own adventure. You can use the calculator how you need to use it, and that makes it very approachable. It makes it very easy to use by anyone. Again, co-ops all do something different, but this is a way to provide the co-ops members exactly what they need and in a timely manner. Thanks.